cross-language connections. Presented by Group 1, Abril Overgaard, Shelley Holcomb, Juan Remigio, Ana Rios, and Elizabeth Torres. First off, let's begin by talking about what is cross-language connections. According to Escamilla et al. 2014, it is an instructional component of Literacy Squared to ensure that teachers offer direct and explicit attention to developing the children's metalinguistic awareness about how Spanish and English are similar and different. Cross-language connections are referred to as the development of metalanguage across languages. There are two types of cross-language connections. First, it refers to the specific methods that were adapted from Mexico, but now has been modified for the use in the U.S. English and Spanish literacy programs. Number two, it focuses on educating children the metacognitive linguistic skills of cross-language expressions in reading and writing. This is all according to Escamilla et al. 2014. When a student makes a connection, it demonstrates to educators that the student has learned and retained the information to apply it in new ways. In other words, when a student can connect what is learned in one language and can apply it and adapt it to new situations in other languages, then the student has demonstrated that he or she can apply resources across two languages. This is from CU Boulder School of Education 2015. As we talked about it as a group, Ms. Shelley Holcomb made a very important point. She made the cross connection and that reminded her a lot about the term translanguaging, as it is stated that it is to ensure teachers to provide direct and explicit attention into developing the children's metalinguistic awareness about how Spanish and English are similar and different. So this made her think about translanguaging. When we talked about it as a group, it sounds logical because that deals with the idea that translanguaging is not being two separate languages, but instead it's coming together to form one linguistic repertoire. Finding the similarities in the languages through cross-connecting brings the idea of not two completely separate entities as well. Let's look at cross-language in action. Cross-language connections allows for the students to talk about how their languages are similar and different. We're going to talk a little bit about cultural variations, and this was a point brought by Juan Remigio, and he talks about how cultural variations helps because the reason is that there is original Spanish vocabulary differences in usage. The term estadounidismos is also interesting. We also call it pocho because it's the mix of words from both languages. Most commonly, English words are accepted to Spanish and are adapted to Spanish. For example, we tend to say parquear in reference to parking, or wacha in reference to watch. Cross-language connections are strategic techniques that are used by educators to assist the students in connecting what they already know in one language with what they are already learning in another. This can help the students build those cross-linguistic connections and increase their metalinguistic awareness. Cross-language involves developing metalinguistic awareness about how Spanish and English are similar and different. It is not concurrent translation. Examples are the color coding, cognates, punctuation and capitalizations, and of course we talked about the cultural variations. Cross-language connections to biliteracy bilingual education field. The cross-language connections can assist when teachers are planning activities to help the students to think and talk about language. According to CU Boulder School of Education 2015, in the case of biliteracy, to understand the relationship between and within languages. Elizabeth Torres brought on a good point to our group. As a group, we discussed that it is important to mention the importance from a student's perspective and why this is where cross-cultural connections come into play. According to Susan Hopwell 2015, she mentions that we must teach them without having to sacrifice their first language. We thought this was particularly interesting because bilingual education envelops both languages, but it seems that our school systems try to have them become English proficient at all costs, even if it's losing their native language. This is where cross-cultural connections come into play. As a bilingual, we transfer information from our first language to make that an important connection to our newly acquired language. Cross-language connections help students to identify, to analyze, and use language forms like sounds, symbols, grammar, vocabulary, and language structures between and across languages. The cross-language connections are really quite helpful for children because languages are interconnected, and this needs to be made explicit for them because they will think and develop deeper metalinguistic awareness. The learning and process of information happens across languages. When these connections are implemented and they are practiced in our classrooms, it purposely plans opportunities for children to compare similarities and differences, according to CU Boulder School of Education 2015. Ms. Shelley Holcomb brought in a good point to our group when she talked about, after watching this video, it really shows how literacy squared in the comprehensive framework involves teachers using all 4 domains: reading, writing, listening, and speaking through equal attention involving meta-language. As a group, we discussed it because oftentimes we hone in on reading and writing, but listening and speaking are just as important. These are the references that we used for our presentation on cross-languages connections. We hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much for your time.